Haiti, a nation of resilience, but one that always seems to be living in turmoil. Political instability, violence, disasters, and uncertainty have shaped life here for decades. And when chaos erupts, the world often responds the same way. They send peacekeepers. In 2004, the United Nations created MINUSTAH, the United Nations Stabilization Mission in Haiti. It had one mission: to restore order, protect the population, and help stabilize the nation. But what happens when the very people sent to bring peace bring devastation instead? In this episode of Investigate, we examine a dark reality: allegations that a UN peacekeeper sexually exploited a Haitian woman, threatening her with his United Nations issued fire. So today, my travels take me far from Haiti, to Canada, where I sit down with the former United Nations chief resident investigator, a man who was tasked with uncovering the truth behind these allegations. When those entrusted with power abuse it, who holds them accountable?
My name is Rob Hotston. My role was with the UN's OIOS, which is the Office of Internal Oversight Services. So they do all of the internal investigations for the UN, not only in terms of all of the UN peacekeeping missions, but all of the different regional offices and also UN headquarters. So I was hired to go down to the UN peacekeeping mission based in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake. It was post-earthquake. There had been a cholera outbreak involving the peacekeepers from Nepal, which I think resulted in several thousand deaths, which didn't really help matters that much because the UN, at least at the start, denied any responsibility whatsoever.
And did they end up owning up to it?
They did.
I mean, is there like corruption, a lot of corruption within the UN?
If you look at sexual exploitation, to me, that's a form of corruption. The main function there, although I could have investigated anything, was basically large-scale fraud and sexual exploitation involving UN staff members. So one of the things that I was, once again, trying to do was not only run a caseload, but also build up the OIOS case presence within the actual peacekeeping mission. MINUSTAH, that's the French acronym for the UN Stabilization Mission in Haiti. It was created, I believe, in the late 1990s, early 2000s. It was basically to help the Haitian government right itself. I don't know if that is the right term to use. Haiti's a very proud country. It's got a very, very turbulent history as well. A lot has happened there. It was basically set up to deal with the situation post-President Aristide and all of the problems that kind of flowed from that. And of course, then you had the earthquake and things like that. But it was basically set up to permit the Haitian people to basically set up their own stable internal governing system, which was already there, but I mean, there were other things which was actually impacting with what was going on. It's a very poor country. When I took the job, I was also hired to go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo to do the same thing. And I'd been to Africa for 5 years, so I'm thinking, well, if I have to come home on leave, Haiti's a lot closer than that. So that was one of the things that came in mind. So I hadn't worked in a peacekeeping mission. So one of the first things they did was they sent me to Brindisi, Italy. And I was at the UN Staff College there to get a fundamental understanding of how a peacekeeping mission worked and what my role would be within. So I was there for 2 weeks. Then I went back to the UN headquarters where I got some indoctrination as to what my role would be as the chief resident investigator with the OIOS based in the peacekeeping mission. From there, not directly into Port-au-Prince, I flew into Santo Domingo because after the earthquake, a lot of the UN resources were redeployed across the border into the DR. So I was there, I got my ID and whatnot, and then flew from Santo Domingo into Port-au-Prince. My first thought, because my hair is fairly short, and I keep it short because of heat, because I love warm countries, is where am I going to get a haircut? I could walk to where I got it cut from where I live. And it's the only barbershop I've ever been to where they actually served you beer while you're getting your hair cut. I lived in a UN compound, okay, and once again, like you pay rent as well, but it was there were a number of UN co-located resources within the same area. So I mean, it was fenced in, there was walls and whatnot. I mean, we had guards at the gates, things of that nature as well. So now, what was interesting was when the camp first went up where I stayed, the landfill that they used to help build it contained medical waste. So when it rained, and Haiti does get rain, you'd see this dirt be washed away and so you see a lot of medical waste, which is not healthy. So one of the things that I did was, okay, let's start an investigation as to why this medical waste was used as landfill. That was one of the things that I started on my own. When I got there, there were files waiting for me. A lot of sexual exploitation allegations involving peacekeepers, but there had been a fraud investigation which had been ongoing for about 3 years, Cash for Jobs, where local people were trying to get jobs as UN contractors because it pays well in terms of the pay down there. But in order to do so, people within the HR office were saying, well, you have to pay me if you want to get a job. So basically, they were asking for bribes. So that was one of the things. And that investigation had started probably 2 years before I got down there, but that was one of the major investigations that I was involved in right from the start. So once again, I mean, I was involved in a very broad range of all kinds of investigations and all kinds of allegations of workplace misconduct. They were HR staff members actively within the UN mission. Over a couple of years, maybe a couple of $1 million US. And of course, these people had paid to get jobs, and the jobs weren't forthcoming. So that's why, okay, well, I paid this UNHR person to get me a job. I didn't get the job. Why didn't I get the job? I'm going to find out. And that's how the investigation started, because people started coming and saying, well, like, I was promised a job, I had paid for it. Well, what do you mean you paid for a job? You don't need to pay for a job within the UN system. So that's how things started in terms of the actual allegations. When you have to know how the UN system works, first of all. So once again, because a lot of files had been, because once again, we're dealing with actual paper files at the time. So we're talking 2012, 2013. Not a lot of stuff had been downloaded. Okay, so and a lot of stuff had been lost during the earthquake. So you're trying to track down, okay, who are the people who paid the money? Let's interview them. Can they identify the people who they paid it to? Are those people still working within the UN system? Where are they located? Okay, is there any kind of paper trail that we can follow? Things of that nature. So I mean, and of course, when you're working by yourself, plus you've got a few other different types of things on the go as well. I mean, it was a challenging time. It was a challenging time. There were no criminal charges laid, but a few people lost their jobs. Okay. Now, having said that, whether or not they might have been hired by some other UN agency, I have no idea. When I was down there as well, the UN HR office within the peacekeeping mission was actually firebombed because, and we figured it was by one of the people who was involved in the Cash for Bribes, because they were trying to intimidate HR people who were helping with the investigation. My office was firebombed as well. So, I mean, you have these threats and these risks that you don't think about, because you think, okay, I'm working within the UN system, everybody's here for the good of all mankind. It's just like any other workplace. You have good people and you have bad people. Sexual assault allegations, there were a fair number of them. And once again, like the UN system on paper, great procedures. But in terms of actual resources at the time, I didn't have any. So the UN manual talks about DNA. Okay, you get DNA. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't give you any resources. So how do I obtain the DNA? Where do I store it? Who's going to test the DNA? Who's going to pay for it? On paper, at the time, great policies, but in terms of actual practicalities, no. I had one investigation involving an orphanage with about 18 kids as likely victims. A UN group of peacekeepers of about maybe 40 or 50 subjects. There were politics involved because the actual orphanage was funded by a church in the southern US. A church volunteer had been on the beach, because this took place on a beach. And of course, she got back to the US. She contacted her local, I want to say congressional representative, but it might have been a state senator. And of course, it made its way up. So rather than contacting the UN directly, it went to the UN, to the US mission at the UN, and it made its way through. So once again, time and whatnot. You've got problems with trying to track the kids down because some of them were no longer within the actual purview of the orphanage. Trying to track down the possible subjects who were involved because it was a holiday weekend. There were probably maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people on the beach. I don't speak Creole, so I had to get an interpreter who knew what they were doing. I was lucky enough to actually find one. I had to bring in an investigator from New York because I reported to UN headquarters in New York because the peacekeeping mission is in the Western Hemisphere, or was in the Western Hemisphere. So rather than report to one of the regional offices, I reported directly to UN headquarters. So I had to contact them. I said, look, this is what's going on. It's a priority, which it was. Can you send me one or two more investigators to help me with this? Well, once again, it took some time for them to find somebody, and in the meantime, we have to find them a place to stay. We have to find, we have to go through all of the red tape and the bureaucracy in terms of, plane tickets down, things of that nature. So, I mean, it was a real challenge. Probably one of the most of all the ones I've done during the probably 40 or some odd years that I've done this type of work. And in the end, it turned out that the group that we thought might have been involved wasn't involved. Something did happen. The kids could not identify those adults who were actually involved. And what I found out as well is that the term blanc in Creole doesn't mean white, it means foreigner. So it could have been anybody. So once again, it reinforced, okay, you need to have an understanding of what the culture is as well when you go in to do an investigation. So you can't just go in and say, okay, well, you know what, I've had all the training, I know what's going on. No, you have to have a fundamental understanding. And that's why it was really important for me when I went down there is to build up as many contacts as I could, because you need to develop relationships in order to do an effective investigation, particularly in a context like that. I can tell you this, during the time that I was down there, I had 22% of all OIS investigations worldwide. So that includes all the investigations that OIS was undertaking at the time within the entire UN. That includes all of the peacekeeping missions, UN headquarters, all of the UN regional offices. By myself, I had 22%. And that's not just in terms of the ones involving, sexual allegations, fraud, thefts, arms trafficking, drug trafficking. I had 2 death investigations as well, because once again, the Haitian judicial system wasn't up and running to the point where the UN could say, okay, we are going to trust you to do an investigation. And the Haitian government would say as well, you know what, these are UN people, we don't want to get involved. So I ended up with one investigation. I was probably there for about a month. I got a call from a local lawyer saying, can you help me? And I said, well, what's going on? He said, I have a client who's been in jail here, not charged, for 2 years. And the allegation, and this was a UN staff member, local staff member, and the allegation was that they had murdered a coworker. And because of the lack of resources and lack of training, OIOS was asked to do the actual investigation, which they did. For some reason, information got lost, files got lost. This guy was sitting in jail for 2 years, hadn't gone before a judge, hadn't gone before a magistrate, nothing. I said, well, let me look into it. So I started searching the files. We had no records at all. So I called my boss at the time. I said, this is what's going on. Can you give me some guidance? He said, well, first of all, we shouldn't be doing murder investigations, which is what they did at the time. But he said, if there's no evidence, there's no evidence. Call this guy's lawyer back. Tell him we have no evidence. Have him go to the court and say there is no evidence, which is what he did, and the guy was out. So that made me feel good that we were able to free this guy, even though he spent 2 years in the local central jail, which was not a nice place. We had an investigation and it involved a seconded officer from Canada, And he had been working as a UN officer down there. He had picked up a sex worker, okay, which is absolutely verboten. During the actual interaction between the two of them, he refused to pay her, and he threatened her with his UN issued service pistol. And she fled the UN vehicle that he was in, but thinking, she grabbed his UN ID that was hanging on the rearview window. That's how we ID'd him. She ran to a nearby house, asked for help. The homeowner made a call. The next call was to the national police, who in turn contacted the UN peacekeeping mission. And because it fell within my sphere of work, I got the actual investigation, contacted the RCMP here. In the meantime, before things actually got on a roll, his actual colleagues paid for him to fly back to Canada. So he could not be actually interviewed. And under the laws at the time, and it still hasn't changed, any disciplinary action would have to be undertaken by the service that he came from, because everything is done by them through the RCMP to the UN. So the UN did our investigation. The RCMP, which is they're actually responsible for UN peacekeeping work. They run Canada's actual peacekeeping operations. They sent down a superintendent. He did their investigation, and then all that information had to be forwarded back to this chap's home service in Quebec. And by the time that was all done, he had retired. So once again, no actual accountability. It could well happen again, yeah. It could well happen again.
So the UN can't file criminal charges?
The UN, no, because what happens is it's viewed as a workplace misconduct. Now, the UN can, if it's a staff member, they can waive legal liability and have the local jurisdiction charge the individual criminally, but only if it's a UN staff member. So no peacekeepers, no police, no military. It's up to the actual country which sends the peacekeeper to deal with it. And that's part and parcel of the way the UN operates. And say this person did this, there's been a theft, there's been a robbery, okay, the government of Haiti, you go ahead, you investigate, we're okay with you laying whatever charges you deem fit.
But if it's military or police,
it's up to the country which sent the peacekeeper to deal with a disciplinary matter.
The RCMP.
Yes.
Did they just have no legal power to bring charges?
No, because once again, they act as a contractor or a contractee with the service that's sending the officer down. So they do all of the processing, they do all the training, they administer the actual program. But the officer comes from the service that sent them. Unless they are an RCMP member. The law in Canada says that if you are a public officer, which includes a member of the RCMP, you can be charged for acts that take place outside of Canada. An individual from another service, like from a town or whatnot, they are not considered a public officer. And at the time, there was a push to change the law so that someone like that could be charged back here for a criminal act that took place extraterritorially. That law hasn't been passed. It's up to the local agency to deal with it administratively within their own jurisdiction.
Not criminally?
Not criminally, because the criminal act took place extraterritorially in Haiti, not in Canada. At one point, there was a group here that had approached the actual federal government, and I think it was the Minister of External Affairs, because the UN was not happy, and the UN was trying to put, was kind of putting a bit of pressure on, but I'm not aware of the law having been changed, no.
So Haiti, if Haiti police officer, because the crime happened in their jurisdiction,
right,
tried to apprehend this guy,
it wouldn't have happened.
So it can't happen.
It can't happen. There'd be a lot of red tape. There'd be a lot of lawyers involved, but in the end, no, nothing would be done. It would have to come back to Canada or the U.S. or the U.K. or France or whatever for them to deal with it.
Haitian police is well aware of that.
The average Haitian officer, I don't know, but certainly the top tier would have been, yeah. The allegations were more frequent than we would like or hope that they would be, that's for sure. We only knew of the allegations that were made when people came forward. I'm sure like there was all kinds of misconduct going on that we never knew about.
I'm sure the story got out. How did that affect the trust or the legitimacy of the mission itself?
I would like to think that it helped because we were seen to be doing something, okay, as opposed to saying, well, you know what, I mean, it didn't happen, she's just looking for money, you know, that type of thing. I could only do what I could do. One of the things that I was quite proud of when I went down there is that there were a number of different investigative entities with their own set of responsibilities, although I could oversee the whole thing. So I said, okay, look, are you people talking to each other? Oh, no. Well, why not share skills, expertise? You may have a case here involving somebody in this investigative agency, which is still part of the UN peacekeeping mission, is involved, and it's got the same guy, but you're not talking to each other. So we set up monthly meetings just so we could share information and skills. You know, so it was interesting because I didn't have anybody there within the office who I could share things with. I mean, there were people who I could talk to. In the morning, I'd stop by and I'd have a cup of coffee with people who I worked with and knew. And of course, once again, that was basically as much an information gathering role for me as it was for me to talk about how I felt and whatnot. But I mean, I didn't have any peers within the actual peacekeeping mission who I could talk to. There was a lot of heat, for lack of a better term, going on, you know, to try and, you know, right the ship, if I can use that term, post-earthquake and all the stuff that had gone on. So I mean, as much as actually doing the investigations, one of my key roles was actually, okay, let's try and refurbish the OIOS image down here. I worked internal investigations for 5 years here, and you know, like you'd like to think of the best of your co-workers, but they are no different than anybody else. It might be stress, it might be just that they're bad people, and sometimes bad people get on a job for whatever reason. I would like to see the law changed here so that when people are deployed as peacekeepers, that if they are not held to be responsible where they're actually working, that they are held to be that when they get back home. I do believe that the police service that individual came from was de-rostered from the RCMP in terms of, will we accept any more people coming from them as possible peacekeepers? When I left, I was quite pleased that my caseload went from 22% to 0. So I managed to deal with everything. And they saw that there was a need to bring in more resources. So where it went from 5 to 1, it went back to 5 after I left. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do some good work as well. And I'm not a really religious person, but somebody asked me once, what can you take away from this? And I said, you know what? I've been doing the Lord's work.
Although the Canadian peacekeeper in this case never seemed to face accountability, Rob's work as a watchdog for the United Nations mattered. His investigations made these stories known. They raised awareness of broken systems that, if left unchecked, allow abuse and criminal behavior to continue. When foreign peacekeepers and workers are sent into vulnerable countries, they're entrusted with something sacred: the safety, dignity, and hope of the people they're sent to protect. But when those same peacekeepers and workers exploit that power, when they commit crimes and walk away, it doesn't just harm one victim, it fractures trust. It undermines the legitimacy of international missions, and it sends a devastating message that some lives matter less. Haiti deserves better than that. Haiti is more than turmoil. It's strength, culture, pride, and resilience. And its people deserve justice, protection, and peace without exploitation attached. Accountability matters, transparency matters, and stories like this must be told, because silence protects the wrong side of history. I'm Nate Andre. This is Investigate, and we'll keep investigating until truth and justice mean something everywhere.